Being live streamed. My internet connection is unstable. What to do? We can just hope for the best.
Has a device connected to the Wi-Fi? Yeah, maybe if anyone knows if they want to say connected to the Wi-Fi, take it off.
Okay. We are studying the Anandasubha Sutta, number 10 in the long discourses. We're reading from Bhante Sujata's translation at this website. And I would like to review what we talked about the last time. This sutta was given several months after the final parinibbana of the Buddha. So a person named Subha, the son of Todaya, approached the Buddha's secretary and a disciple, Ananda, and asked what type of practice was praised by the Buddha. And Ananda responded by quoting almost word for word a section of an entire other long sutta, the sutta on the fruits of recluseship. So this is almost identical with another sutta that's much more famous, but I wanted to show you that this is one way that sometimes the Dhamma is taught, by memorizing the words of the Buddha. And if the teacher or bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, the Buddha said, and repeat the relevant teachings without necessarily trying to give a modern psychological spin on it, not necessarily trying to compare what the Buddha said with what all the other religions of the world have to say, not necessarily having to do some kind of a critical analysis where we say that, well, this is what they recorded, but those monks of the past were uneducated because they didn't have computers, and so they got it wrong and they didn't write it down the right way, but I know better. No, we don't do this. Some monks will just simply try to understand clearly and be present and receptive for the version that we have, the best available version we have of what the Buddha said, and to work with that. So the last time we talked in particular about the ethics, and I tried to emphasize the purpose of ethics, which is those actions of body, speech, and mind, which are conducive to ultimately to the eradication of the taint of sensuality, the taint of craving for a favorable rebirth, and the taint of ignorance. Those being the very knowledges that are the mark of full enlightenment, of Nibbana. So our ethics are for the purpose of Nibbana. Along the way, we saw last time how the ethical practices are conducive to harmony, conducive to kindness, conducive to non-remorse, conducive to joy, conducive to certain. And so by practicing become ethically mature, then a person can have that, not the pleasure, not the addictive kind of pleasure, but the true happiness, tranquility, which is experiencing both in the body and the mind. And with that, they're ready for meditation. And there's a whole series of causation that leads along to bring the to lead along from stages of happiness, being able to enter into content, become and then that progress of our path is got the launch pad or right ethics. We talked the last time about the 5 precepts as the generality, and then in this sutta we saw how detailed which is the way it's taught to bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, a much more detailed set of regulations are implemented. And I think our discussion was kind of fruitful in a way that we saw both that each person, part of ethical maturity is having the discernment to be clear about what your ethic is, what is definitely something that's out of bounds for you, that if you fall into that, you've got to take care of it, and something else that's okay, although it might be maybe going in the wrong direction, but you don't need to treat it at the same level. So we talked about the advantage of having clarity in ethics, but then we also spoke about how sometimes that which is the true heart of morality is not captured by precepts. So no matter how many rules and regulations you have, all your rules and regulations don't really and also it could happen sometime that something is not allowed by rules and regulations, but it's truly the best ethical and moral choice to make at a given time. And that also is part of having ethical maturity, is to be able to have that discernment. And if, for example, the example I gave last time is I'm giving this Dhamma class on Zoom, and in our precept based on the ancient Indian standards of courtesy, I should not be speaking about the Dhamma to anybody who's wearing shoes. But I can't tell whether or not y'all are wearing shoes over there in the small screen, and yet I'm teaching you anyway, out of compassion. So I'm actually not worried about whether someone who watches this video is wearing shoes, wearing a hat, lying down in a bar, or carrying a weapon. I can't control that anymore. I just teach anyway. So the morality of spreading the Dhamma through this vehicle outweighs the risk that somebody might be in an impolite decorum while they're listening to the Dhamma talk. They might be lying in bed falling asleep while they're listening to the Dhamma talk, right? So that's what we talked about the last time with ethics. Now we're going to come to the part about meditation, which in this case, Bhante Sujato translates meditation as immersion, but he means bhavana or meditation. I don't know what page it is on the book. Somebody who is familiar with the sutta could point out where it is in the book. Here. This morning, one of the other members of our group, he's not here at the moment, but he was asking about taking a course in Buddhism in order to have things in an organized way and to get a diploma and know that he's covered the basics. This sutta is kind of a good, one of the basic patterns of the whole path of practice. So if you want to have a master's degree in enlightenment, you could go through this course and master each step completely. And then at the end, you will be enlightened. And if you come to me, I'll give you a certificate. So this is how we practice meditation. After having cultivated our mature ethics and morality, then practice sense restraint. When a mendicant sees a sight with their eyes, they don't get caught up in the features and details. If the faculty of sight were left unrestrained, bad, unskillful qualities of covetousness and displeasure would become overwhelming. So for that reason, they practice restraint, protecting the faculty of sight. So then that means seeing something that's beautiful or delightful or pleasing, tasty, lovely. If the sight or if the sense is pulled into that and is like a gourmet person savoring the taste of the gourmet food, dwelling on the details of, what it is and how beautiful, how attractive, how delightful it is, then this allows desire to grow. And similarly, if there's something that's repulsive or disgusting, if you get carried away with how with the details of how disgusting or horrible it is, and the mind gets carried away with the story of that, even those who are somewhat mature in Dhamma might have given up their major addictive behavior to sensual pleasure, but they could still be quite vulnerable to a judgmental attitude towards things that are evil and bad. And so if you hate your enemy, or if you find somebody that you read about in the news or somebody that you know to be a bad person, the mind can become quite obsessed and caught up with the story about what it is about them that makes them bad. And that's the failure to guard the senses. Even when we train in how to practice loving kindness, when extending loving kindness to the difficult person, the training that I received is first developing loving kindness towards those where it's more natural, towards the dear friend or the one's own self, or the dear friend or the lovable person and the neutral person, and then visualizing something that has strength and solidity. The example I was given is the bones. The bones of the body are very hard. So if you're developing loving kindness, first you gin up a lot of loving kindness and you let it saturate into your skeleton so that the skeleton becomes radioactive with loving kindness and really solid. And then you bring up that name of that horrible person, but don't think about their story. Don't think about anything about their qualities at all. Just call their name. And you're going to keep your loving kindness just solid so that it doesn't blink or waver at all. And just direct that loving kindness towards that bad person without getting caught up in their bad qualities. So that's an example of using sense restraint to not allow any of the senses to get caught up in the lovely qualities or the repulsive qualities. And it repeats the same theme with all of the 5 physical senses. And then in terms of the mind, if you have a thought in the mind, a thought in your mind, don't get caught up with the features and details of that thought. So you practice restraint towards your own thoughts in the mind. So this practice of restraint, protecting the faculties, then is a cause of bliss. And the bliss is the bliss of not being the victim of your own reactions. I'm going to pause a moment and see whether there's a comment or question. This practice of practicing restraint with the senses. Okay, would you mind talking to the microphone?
Thank you, Aya. Would you just talk a little more about the features of a thought? Is that referring specifically to just the content, or could you just expound on that a little?
Well, when I think about how one could get caught up and carried away with a thought, it makes me think of the process of proliferation, where a perception becomes a story. So something happens which is not what I was expecting, as an example. And because of the being surprised, it creates an unpleasant feeling. And then it could be that a certain perception arises because of that. So far, it's very a rare person who could like cut it at the feeling. If you could cut it at the feeling, that would be fine. Or else the perception arises and you may be able to cut it there. But then the perception creates its own feeling. And so having a negative perception creates an unpleasant feeling, and that creates a synergy that spins around. The example was, something happened at the monastery that was not fair. This was when I was living among the monks, and one of the younger monks did something that displeased me. And actually, I could see the whole process. It wasn't me doing it. It was just the 5 khandhas doing it. First, the hair stood up, the hackles went up, the body became, shocked. And then the perception that I had was that monk is a male chauvinist pig, so something like really like that. That's strong. And then the story became, I have to do something to stop him from harming the women through his chauvinist behavior. And it was like really being like caught up. Then in order to get out of it, by reframing the perception into a perception that was not so triggering, by saying, well, actually, he doesn't realize what he's doing because he was trained not to look at women. So he didn't notice the women. That's why he, unintentionally, so something like that. But this whole process of thinking and planning and reacting, and it's basically like you're getting yourself ginned up and wired up to do something. In this case, based on aversion, or it could be doing something based on greed. So that with the mind process it's a process of activation and it has the normal purpose of calling up enough energy to take an action. Okay. Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments about this? Okay, Ren.
Thank you, Aya. I was thinking about what you mentioned this morning with the breathing breath meditation. You're saying that it's not just observing our breath and noticing where it is and how it is in our body. It's just the first steps. And the second part that goes with it is with the mind.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that you could explain a little more about that process, how mind and breath come together that way. And I'm also thinking what you just explained in the example earlier, would that be part of what's going on during meditation? Was that what you meant by that?
Well, and the story I told, I was not meditating with that whole story going on, but it could have happened. So one thing that happens, that's a very easy one to notice in meditation, is the mind is able to land on the object of meditation and remain there, or else the mind is pulled away and runs off into being distracted and not being able to stay with the object of meditation because something else is stronger. It could be another sensation like a bodily pain or a noise or something like that, or it could be, it reminds you of something and some memory or some thought, worry, plan, or something comes along, and then you lose the meditation because of thinking. So just noticing the state of the mind, like is the mind able to be resting on the object, or is it falling off completely, or is it mostly on the object, or it just sort of like wobbles a little bit, like something else comes in and it's like some noise in the background, like maybe the curtain behind you you could be looking at me, and while you're looking at me, you can see the curtain behind, but you don't get like completely distracted by the curtain because it's just staying in the background. So just noticing how the mind is in connection with meditation. And even when the meditation is, we think of the mind or the thinking as being noticed when we're having problems and suffering with the hindrances and falling away from meditation. But even when the meditation is good, if the mind is staying connected and even experiencing, like there's a breath is happening and blissful feeling is happening, and the mind is very clear and you can really see it. So just noticing this, how the mind is clear right now. So that's an example of noticing the state of mind, but an example of unskillful getting not having restraint with the mind sense and getting caught up in the signs could be if some feeling comes along and then you begin to psychoanalyze yourself and be investigating what happened during your childhood that is causing, for some reason during this meditation, that this particular feeling is coming along. That would be losing the meditation by being caught up in the signs. Does that seem clear?
So then, for example, if I were to have a negative reaction towards somebody's behavior, like what you just described earlier, and then I try to get a different perspective on, well, maybe whatever, just to give them benefit of the doubt, for example, right? It's during meditation, is that the kind of thing that's not to be emphasized? That kind of rationalize and, how else to describe it?
I guess I would say as a preliminary practice to meditation, I believe that it's all right to think about resolving things that are disturbing the mind, like that judgmental feeling about a person. That's throwing up a hindrance that's going to make it difficult to meditate. And so reflecting about that in order to take care of it and get out of the reactivity is a good preparation for the meditation, but that's not meditation itself. And then if thoughts like that come up during the meditation, the suggestion is not to get involved in exploring, rationalizing, reflecting, pondering, and thinking about it, but just say, okay, that's a thought, and just notice it. But if you're like in a mess because you're really upset and you sit on the meditation cushion, and despite trying to watch the breath, you spend the entire hour worrying about your problems, or in some kind of more like intense thinking, that could happen sometimes. And if that's what you're stuck with, then you need to be mindfully aware of that. There's nothing you can experience that's not a suitable object for mindful awareness. But I did, and what the procedure of meditation is not designed towards thinking and solving problems, but it's designed towards coming to an altered state of mind, which is free from greed and aversion, which is very peaceful and very clear, and having the agency, the ability to sit down and to let go of that kind of discursive thinking and to bring the mind to a more quiet place.
Thank you, Ayat. I got it now. That was very clear.
Good. Great. Questions are wonderful. I appreciate them so much. So then the next course, the next thing to accomplish, if you would like to be an arahant, you need to have what Bhikkhu Bhante Sujata translates as mindfulness and situational awareness. Most people translate that as mindfulness and clear comprehension. Sati sampajanya. Sati is mindfulness. Sampajanya is it's a kind, janya is a type of knowing. It's like knowing all around. And in this case, this is a wonderful practice that should be done all day long, not only while on the cushion. Just know what you're doing. Am I coming or going? Am I looking ahead or aside, bending, extending the limbs? Wearing my clothes, putting on my coat, eating, drinking, chewing, tasting, urinating, defecating, walking, standing, sitting, sleeping, waking, speaking, keeping silent. Know what you're doing. And now there is another kind of explanation of this given in the commentary, but I've also heard a very good teacher, Tanjef Tanisaro, emphasize this. If you could just continuously, from the time you open your eyes in the morning until you go to sleep, if you know what you're doing all the time and never zone out, that would be very transformative. In the normal course of events, a person does things automatically. So a little toddler who's just learning how to walk may need to like really concentrate on being standing up and being balanced and lifting the foot and placing it and taking those first steps in life. But an ordinary person who's walking, it doesn't require any conscious awareness at all to put one foot in front of the other. And so you could walk, think about your problems, have a conversation, or be walking and reciting some things that you've memorized, even walking and watching your telephone. All of those things can happen because the walking is being done on automatic. So that which is happening on automatic is in the subconscious. You're not consciously aware of walking when the mind is somewhere else. But as a specialized practice, to be actually aware of walking, that this is balancing, lifting the foot, moving it, placing it. This is reaching it. So when when eating the food, eating the food is in a certain way, it's just like putting gas in the car or putting some logs into the wood stove. You just throw it in and it does the job of giving the nourishment. So a person could be eating and watching something, or they could be eating and conversing, or eating and thinking. They could be doing all kinds of different things, and just the process without even having any awareness of picking out the food, bringing it to the mouth, chewing it, tasting it, swallowing it. So the suggestion is, it's a special skill to go through all the postures of the throughout the day, with keeping the actual what's being done with the body, keeping it in conscious awareness. That's a kind of meditation. Sometimes you would not be able to practice meditation. You wouldn't be able to practice this because if you say driving, maybe, if you were fully mindful when driving, you would end up driving very slowly, and it could be hazardous to other cars. So it's a good thing in driving that a person naturally stays on the right side of the road and avoids running into the oncoming cars. That just happens unconsciously. And so it's okay to sometimes allow this automated process to go on. There's nothing evil about that, but it's a kind of meditation to bring all the things that normally are subconscious, bring them into conscious awareness. So that's my understanding of this practice. In the commentary, they have a series of questions that you could ask, like, what am I doing? What's the purpose? What's the suitability, meaning, like, is it the right time to eat? Is it the right time to drive? And so on. What is the domain, which is being concerned about your own body-mind continuum and not like putting the blame or placing the story with external things. And then the wisdom of seeing that it's all an impersonal process of a sequence of phenomena arising due to causation. I see that in the commentary, but I think, to me, what Thanissaro suggested about just being continuously aware and bringing these bodily actions from the subconscious to the conscious is a more powerful training. And it would be the kind of thing that you could do if you're trying to have an entire day that's meditative. Right. So now pause again. Any questions about that? Or comments about that? Continuing the course. Practicing contentment. For a monastic or a mendicant, it's being content with the robes to protect the body, alms food to protect the belly. They go out taking only these things. They're like a bird. Wherever it flies, wings are its only burden. And the same way, the mendicant is content just with the robes to look after the body and the alms food to look after the belly. Extreme simplicity, going to the extreme of avoiding acquisitions and avoiding that mind which is filled with longing, which sees something that's not exactly what it should be and wanting to make it different than it is. Let's see. Yesterday, here at the monastery, I noticed something that was broken, and because of my job, the instant reaction was, oh, I've got to look up that part and order a replacement of that part and fix it so it won't be broken anymore. And sometimes because of our work, like, we have to do these things. But if I let myself get caught up in that attitude, it's a danger. It's really a danger to the practice. The Buddha said one should know the measure with food. And so if I'm like beset with worrying about the food, like the food is not just exactly what it should be for the nourishment of the body, and I'm afraid I'm going to get some disease because the food was not what it should have been, or else thinking the food today is very good, but the food tomorrow might not be good. So we better like stock up and take some extra food so that we won't be lacking tomorrow. Or I could satisfy the body now with food, but then maybe later on this evening I'll be hungry. And so better, stock up. So this is how, because of fear, can be driving that acquisitiveness, which is sort of like a desire for safety. We want to protect ourselves by having a lot of stuff. As people get the hoarding disease because they somehow the more things they have, the more safe they feel. What is recommended here for meditation, at least while you're on a meditation retreat, go as far as you can go into this radical simplicity. And in your life, I know that there's one person in this room now has made a practice of removing a lot of their extra possessions that they don't really need, that just provide clutter. And they're doing that in order to make their life and their physical surrounding to be supportive of meditation. Pausing again and asking if there's any comment or question about contentment. Who's ready to just have just your outfit and your food for this day be all you have to worry about? Ren?
I cannot tell you how much I long for that feeling of having no burden other than my wings, being that bird, what you said. And I was just contemplating, like, practically how it has been for me and also in general, because there's this fear of missing out thing, right? So if people around me are gathering a lot of stuff, resources, whatever, because of their fear, and if I don't participate and maybe protect myself, then maybe it won't be anything left. And then I'm back into the same fear that I'm trying to avoid. So yeah, it's very interesting. I'm definitely feeling a lot of draw towards not having that kind of burden whatsoever. I just don't know if I could, how consistently I can be with that mindset and in practice, especially.
And so what you're experiencing now can be observed and watched with mindfulness. There's no experience that's not a good object for mindfulness. Now I'm going to tell you a story from the Quaker tradition. William Penn, who was the founder of Philadelphia, was a Quaker. And another person, was appointed to be the sergeant at arms, which is a position of the local government. So the council of that colony, they had a job. One of the jobs is sergeant at arms, and the sergeant at arms is required to wear a sword. But he's a Quaker, so he doesn't want to have a sword. And he goes to ask for advice. What should I do? I'm a Quaker. I don't use weapons. I don't practice war. How can I carry this sword, which is the badge of my office? And the answer that was given was, keep carrying it as long as you can. And when you can't carry it anymore, then put it down. And I think something like that is a kind of a good answer for people who are in the process of extracting themselves from a life which is filled with possessions and wealth and responsibilities, to think you carry your responsibilities and your duties until it becomes possible to let them go. And when you can let them go, then let them go. Ananaya has typed a comment. I'm pretty close to letting it all go. Yes, that's true. Okay, so we'll continue. Now we come to giving up the hindrances. So it's like these first 3 points are like the precondition for meditation. So before you come and sit down on the cushion, you should have been doing those 3 things. And then you come and sit down on the cushion. You come to a secluded lodging, a wilderness, the root of a tree, a hill, a ravine, a mountain cave, a charnel ground, a forest, open air, or a heap of straw. After the meal, that means you've done your chores in the morning. They return from alms round, or whatever your chore is in the morning. You wash your dishes, you've cleaned your body, you've tidied up the space. Then sit down cross-legged, put your body straight, establish mindfulness in front of you. Then, giving up covetousness for the world, they meditate with a heart rid of covetousness. You could translate this as longing or desire. Cleansing the mind of covetousness, giving up ill will and malevolence. They meditate with the mind rid of ill will, full of compassion for all living beings. Cleansing the mind of ill will. Giving up dullness and drowsiness, they meditate with a mind rid of dullness and drowsiness, perceiving light, mindful and aware. Cleansing the mind of dullness and drowsiness. Giving up restlessness and remorse, they meditate without restlessness. Their mind peaceful inside, cleansing the mind of restlessness and remorse. Giving up doubt, they meditate having gone beyond doubt, not undecided about skillful qualities. Cleansing the mind of doubt. And now we have these brilliant metaphors. The longing for the world. Suppose a man who has gotten into debt were to apply himself to work and his efforts proved successful. He would pay off the original loan and have enough left over to support his partner. Thinking about this, he'd be filled with joy and happiness. So greed is like being in debt. You got to keep working for the boss until the debt is paid off. This kind of greed, we would associate this with the hedonic treadmill. So you reach for something that seems to be promising happiness, then you get it and you grasp it, but because of impermanence, it only gives you happiness for a little while, and then very soon you become no longer pleased with that thing. The pleasure fades away. There's a disappointment. And then the mind begins to want to reach for something else. And so you're reaching for one thing after another, which I guess would be like the compound interest, somebody who's in debt, so they're only able to pay off the interest and they can never pay off the principal, right? So that's the metaphor for greed or longing, is the metaphor of debt, being a debtor. Then for ill will and malevolence, suppose a person was sick, suffering, and gravely ill. They lose their appetite, they get physically weak. But then after some time, they recover from that illness, regain their appetite and their strength. Thinking about that, they'd be filled with joy and happiness. So ill will makes you sick. And I guess I would say that if a person is despised and hated by others, I'm going to wait a minute. There's an airplane here. Let the plane go by. When a person is a victim of ill will, if they internalize it, they could also become ill because of that. And if they're a perpetrator of ill will, also they make themselves ill, and it's both the body and the mind. It's very difficult to harm another living creature without first having ill will towards them. Like if you see a very cute, tiny little mouse, and he's so cute. Oh, look at the little mouse, right? So then you wouldn't want to kill him if you see him like that. But if you wanted to kill them, you have to start hating them first before you can kill them. Huh? And so then the karmic repercussions of that also is what's creating the subsequent pain and distress. Now these are also has the refrain that when you escape from each one of the hindrances, having escaped, one is flooded with joy and happiness. This is called pamoja, and this is part of the entrance into meditation, is knowing how to gladden the heart, knowing how to gladden the mind is an essential part of the preparation for meditation. Now for dullness and drowsiness, this is compared to, suppose a person was imprisoned in a jail, and then after some time they're released from jail, safe and sound, with no loss of wealth. Thinking about this, they'd be filled with joy and happiness. So drowsiness is like jail because you become so weak, right? You're not able to do anything. It's like being in prison because of your weakness. It becomes dark because the eyes go down. Something that I personally notice at times when I'm drowsy, the mind sometimes becomes very out of control in terms of like dreams and daydreams, like the thoughts that are running away. For me is something that can happen just when not having enough energy to direct the mind. And so then just in the process of dozing off, the mind starts to spin around, and a lot of like dreamlike thoughts and images come along. And I don't know quite how you would compare that to jail, but maybe it will be the guard or the prisoners or something that are annoying you while you're in jail, and you can't do anything about it because you don't have the capacity. Then the restlessness and remorse. Suppose a person was a bond servant. They would not be their own master, but indentured to another, unable to go where they wish. So then the boss says, do this, you have to do this. The boss says, do that, you have to do that. If your virtue, if your morality is based on remorse and guilt, maybe you had a kind of like a punitive type of upbringing where the parents or the teachers were like threatening you with punishment and teaching you that, that your bad qualities would cause punishment. And then you would become like fearful of your own bad qualities. Or even if someone is raised, if the parents are very protective of the child in terms of sexual misconduct or getting involved too early with sex, And they teach them that sex is dangerous, sex is bad, don't get them, stay away from sex, don't think about sex. You know, no, sex is dirty, sex is horrible. And then you will have like a young man or a young woman who's ready to get married, and they're completely terrified. They can't enjoy sex because of the terror, the fear that they have. And so this restlessness and remorse is compared to somebody who has that kind of harsh and punitive boss who's always pushing them. But then when you are your own master, we were discussing this last time about how true ethical maturity comes from being able to look within and to find within your own heart where your true happiness lies. And so that inner knowledge, that inner intuition of what is compatible with morality is something you're the owner and the master of that. And it's not coming from a fear of that guilt and remorse is not the primary driver. And if you have a moral shame that comes up before doing something bad, you only need to be ashamed for one split second, just long enough to stop yourself from doing it. And then you don't need to carry the shame around with you. So it's like carrying a big house full of shame around is opposite to meditation. It's a hindrance that will stop us from being successful. And then the last one is doubt. And this is compared with a person who has wealth and property traveling on a desert road, which is perilous. They have nothing to eat. And they're not sure which way to go or how far they need to go to the next oasis, or whether they're going to encounter some hazard. They don't know whether they're going to make it or not. So then they're plagued with that anxiety. But after having crossed over the desert, arriving in the village, in a sanctuary free of peril, then one would be filled with joy and happiness. So in the same way, one should abandon these hindrances and be happy, rejoice, enjoy the moments. We notice the bad things so much easier than we notice the good things. Or noticing the absence of a bad thing is, unless you train the mind to notice that, you might not notice it. But notice when the 5 hindrances have been let go and put down. Or if any of these tendencies arises, if you're able to, with confidence, to say, I don't need that. I say, no, thank you. You know, I can, when something comes up in my mind, I talk to my mind and say, oh, Mrs. Greed, thank you for sharing, but I don't need that. Oh, Mr. Anger. Okay, I see you're very angry. You would like me to be angry too, but I'm not going to take it. I'm not going on that road. Thanks, but no thanks. So I can notice it with compassion and immediately let go. Seeing the hindrances given up, the joy springs up, being joyful. Rapture springs up. Rapture is, in the Pali, it's piti, and sometimes it's transferred as joyful interest. I very much associate it with, I think in pop psychology, something called flow, where one can engage with what you're chosen to be engaged with, and with a lot of ease and comfort, just remain in that track with that thing, so this rapture has that quality of interest. And then when the mind is full of joyful interest, then the body becomes tranquil. When the body is tranquil, they feel bliss. And bliss is his translation for the word sukha, which is elsewhere translated as happiness. So interest, it's confusing when you say, what's the difference between rapture and bliss? It's like, who knows? I mean, some people translate them the opposite. One is bliss and the other one is rapture. One is sort of like an activation of awareness. It's like this pleasant, joyful interest. And then the happiness is a feeling. So that's a Vedana. So the happiness is just the result. So when happiness comes, you're not doing anything, you just experience it. That's the fruition from the action. So the joyful interest is more like a mental action, and the happiness is like the result of that. When one is happy, the mind is happy, or the mind is blissful, then the mind becomes immersed. And immersion is samadhi. That's his translation for samadhi, sama samadhi, which is very often translated as concentration, or sometimes translated as unification of the mind. Can you think of other ways that gets translated, samadhi?
Aya,
Yes,
Ajahn Brahm refers to that frequently as stillness.
stillness.
He
Okay,
uses the word stillness.
yeah, that's very good. So secluded from sense pleasures. I actually, I think I see that it's 2:20, and I'm really glad to have taken this much time talking about this part of the practice. Shall we have some time for questions and then come back to the 4 jhanas at a future meeting? I think I'd like to do that because I don't want to be just rushing through this. This next section is really profound and important, and to get your master's degree in enlightenment, you need to take this course. So I see Ananaya has a hand up, and then Ling, you have a comment? Let's let Ananaya speak first.
Yeah, before going away from this section, I just realized as you were going through the descriptions of, you're imprisoned and then you come out and you have this joyfulness or something. I really just realized that, I do this, like you were suggesting in your mind, you refer to anger as something, Mr. this or that, or the irritation. I do that, on a regular basis, catch myself, something arising and catch it and say something like, okay, no, we're not going there or whatever. But the thing I haven't been doing, I don't have the joyful, oh, I actually did. I mean, they're gone now. I put it aside. I actually did that.
Yes.
And, it seems so obvious, but I really haven't been taking that step. And that's a big, big thing about happiness or joyfulness in meditation, which for myself, being a type A person, has always been, meditation is like, okay, this is what I have to do. That's how I started out, years ago. But still, it's like more, all right, let's get yourself together, rather than, oh, goody, we now have, 2 hours to meditate. So that's a really important piece that I have been missing all this time. It's kind of astounding in some ways, but I'm glad it finally popped up. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. So what Anana is pointing out is how you reframe your experience. Each time you emerge from any kind of negativity, notice it clearly, mark it clearly in your mind, and yes, enjoy that. Enjoy the moment. Ling, if you want to comment, I have to ask you if you don't mind coming up and talking to the microphone, so that people inside.
I just want to make a quick comment about concentration. Stillness is one thing. For me, that comes up is the alignment. When people climb a tree, or climb a wall, they're not. I think they're moving, but that alignment of meaning your mind and body fully align in doing one thing. And this can also apply to everything, right? Walking, eating, so that really acuteness, I think for me, is concentration. It just
She's making this gesture like this to speak about the alignment, the mind and body.
yes.
Yeah. Throughout this sequence, we've seen that the mind and body are together. And we can have much more clarity about what's going on with the mind when we see that connection and when we observe how the body is reflecting what's going on in the mind, and how it's a circular pattern. Ren?
Thank you, Aya. I'm still struggling with something that I understand the concept, but it's not integrated. So, like for example, when you said when we feel angry or anxious, and then you were saying, well, I'm not, or Mr. Anger, I'm not going to follow there. I understand you want me to join you, but I'm not going to go there. And then so this person or this I that has the agency to decide, I'm going to do that, or I'm not going to follow this feeling, I'm not going to follow my physical urges, or whatever, this I that has an agency, I understand that it's not permanent either, right? Because consciousness shifts as well, mind changed as well, they're impermanent. So I think what I'm struggling with is how to integrate this sense of I when I try to do the practice. I'm not trying to go the philosophical level, I'm trying to get to the practical level where I could really integrate it within. I mean, who is this I, and is this something that I just hang on to as an entity until it's time to let it go? Is it like a step, it's a transition to hang on to it until it's not useful anymore?
Thank you for that wonderful question. When I spoke about that dialogue about, okay, Mr. Anger, in particular, this is in reference to something that I worked up a number of years ago about emotions and how it's manifesting in the different aggregates of personality. So when a person is angry, something is happening in the body. There's a certain kind of feeling going on, and there's a certain kind of perception going on. And there's a certain kind of volition arising. In particular, when I'm having, well, as far as the body and the feeling, in a certain kind of way, like even if the mind changed on a flash, the adrenaline is still going to be in the body for a couple of minutes. And so I just got to sort of bear it as far as allowing the anger that's held in the body to be like drained away. The feeling is also it's the result of the conditions that happened before. And so I'm not able to force the feeling to change. I'm not, if there's an unpleasant feeling, I don't say, okay, Mrs. Payne, I don't want you to go away. So in a certain way, I just have to accept the pain or the pleasure. It's just a feeling. It's just there because of causes and conditions. And I just need to see what it is and watch it. But then when it comes to a perception, this is where we do kind of have a choice. And my question about the perception is it really true? Is this really true? So the monk I spoke about that I perceived to be a chauvinist, but then later I perceived that he was acting according to his training. He's somebody who had a particular monastic training. And so it could be that both things are true in part, but one kind of truth causes my mind to get more agitated and wound up, and a different kind of truth allows the mind to get more calmed down and more spacious and able to relax. So I can choose to focus my attention on the aspect of things which is helping the mind to be calm. And to get out of being emotional, because when I'm emotionally excited, I'm going to be biased anyway. So, but then the last part is what I was trying to say. It's the volition. So if I say, okay, Mr. Anger, what is it that you really want me to do? And I refer to this as the calling a spade meditation. That means if something is, like an unpleasant truth or something like that, if you just call it what it is. So then I say, okay, Mr. Anger, what do you really want me to do? And Mr. Anger wants me to get rid of that person and make them disappear so I never have to see them again. Okay, so, but that's not like realistic. And it's also like if I said, "Whoa, I'm a Buddhist nun. How could I have a desire like that?" And so when I see that volition, say, "Wow, this volition exists in me. Wow, that's," and then I could like choose. This is where I have the agency. I could choose a different volition. So instead of getting rid of them, I could give them a flower. On purpose. I could literally, on purpose, I could say, okay, with intention, I got this flower. And I said, would you take this flower, please?
Yep.
Okay. So I replaced, I wasn't hating on you. I wasn't hating on you. So I replaced the one volition that was the cause of trouble and distress and upset and unskillfulness and everything else. There's a possibility to choose. We have, at any given moment of time, we have thousands of different volitions that we could choose. They're all going on in the brain at 1 billion times per second. I could talk about this next Tuesday, about how the choices, like we got a lot of choices. There's like billions of choices happening all the time. So, oh, thank you.
Not gonna be worried about
anyway, so then, so who chooses? Volition chooses. It's the volition, the function of volitional formations is what chooses the intention. So it's not like me, myself, and I, it's one of the functions of the mind. Just same, the eye has the function of seeing, volition has the function of choosing. Now, I'll come back to you, Rand. Do you have a follow-up question?
Then in that case, if I understand you, then when I refer to myself, or when I heard you said I, me, and all that, in order to locate what that is, that's part of the mind's volition. That's part of the volition of the mind. Is that correct? So if I were the umbrella of where that I is when I'm in a daily life, when I refer to myself, my practice, I, whatever, I choose to do this, and that's part of umbrella of the mind, right? That's changing as well.
I think the I is kind of a conventional term that could cover all of it. Like when I say I could be referring to my body, or my volition, or my consciousness, or some combination thereof. And conventionally, we just refer to it as I, but it's a series of functions or activities of a sentient being.
Okay, I got that.
Any further questions, especially about the hindrances and what it's like to be secluded from the hindrances, or to abandon the hindrances when they're present and cause them to disappear?
This isn't a question so much, but on that, again, on the putting aside the hindrances or stopping them or whatever. It's a sutta, and I don't remember the which one, but it's always stuck with me. Is the Buddha says very directly to the bhikkhus, when something is happening, when this begins to arise, or you see this, don't pick up the sign. Don't go for it. Stop. Think. Just don't pick it up. And I found that really enormously helpful.
Mhm. A lot of times that sign, which is the trigger for the hindrance to become strong, it has a personal aspect, like something is a danger to me, or it's like that person is good, or that person is bad, or that person is ugly, or that person is beautiful, or I like this, or I hate this. And so then one really good tip for putting down the hindrance, or for putting down the sign, for not picking up the sign. We learned this from our dear friend Diane. She said, it's not personal. That's such a wonderful mantra. So whatever's going on, whatever we experience.
I remember very, very clearly several years ago on retreat, when I'd been meditating and I was walking down the hall, and it just came as clear as a bell. It's not personal, and nothing is actually personal.
Right.
It's just all a convention, all made up stuff. So yes, it's not personal is fabulous.
I want to announce to everybody that next Sunday, I will be called away to attend a ceremony at the Wat Buddhanasorn in Fremont. So Aya Suvijana is going to teach this Zoom sutta class. She's going to teach us sutta about the factors of awakening. I'm sure it will be wonderful. So I encourage you to come to this class, same time, same class next week. And Aya Suvijana will be coming in from the Empty Cloud Monastery in New Jersey to teach that program. So if that's enough, if we're satisfied, let us pay respects to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Araham Samma Sambuddha Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivadimi. Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamman Namasam. Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami.
Thank you, Aya.
Thank you.